The following stories contain content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of Realityworsethannightmares. In this episode, there are 3 stories from the subreddit Let's Not Meet. If you have a story that you would like to submit, please send it to realityworsethannightmares@gmail.com. Again, that's realityworsethannightmares@gmail.com. You can also follow on Twitter at realnightmares with a Z. That's realnightmares with a Z. There's a spelling in the description if you need it. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the stories. Let's get started. He was waiting in the women's bathroom. I'm an 18-year-old female working the 4 p.m. to midnight shift at a nice clean gas station convenience store in Canada. Because the location of my workplace is right beside a highway, it's common for people to settle in the parking lot for a while, or even the entire night. What isn't common is when someone parks right outside the window beside the cash register, parallel to the building. It's about 11 p.m. and I'm preparing to close my shift, excited to go home and rest. Keep in mind, I'm only 18, I still live with my parents. A rush of customers comes and goes when I notice a parked car outside. Right beside the cash register, there's a huge window in order for the workers to look out to see the customers at the pumps. Many people have parked there before, but none have ever parked parallel to the store, snuggled up to the curb.
Whatever,
I thought. Maybe the man or woman is just exhausted. 11:30 rolls around and the car is still parked there. I had to go outside and shut the oil shack, which happened to be right next to where the car was parked. As I closed the shack, I look into the car to see the driver's seat reclined all the way back with a man lying back with a smirk on his face. I rushed inside and got behind the counter. Right as one of my regulars walked in, I pointed out the man in the car, joking that he's waiting for me. The regular seemed worried, telling me to call the cops. He said to stay safe, he had to get back to work. I decided against calling the cops, because the guy could have easily just been resting after a long haul. Around 11:45, I decided to call my sister, because the guy was still outside. We live about 15 minutes from my workplace, a perfect amount of time for her to get there in time for closing. I told her the lowdown, which she responded that she was leaving at that moment and would be there soon. 11:48, the guy gets out of the car. Well, shit. I'm closing in less than 10 minutes and now he decides he wants a snack. As I watch him, I notice he's walking around near the pumps, staring off into the sky. Later, I assume he was looking for the cameras. 11:50, he walks into the store, not returning my greeting. He walks right towards the bathrooms. A couple of customers walk in, and because I was busy with them, I assume the man may have walked out without me knowing. 12:01, my sister shows up. Thank God. But the car was still parked outside. She comes in and asks what's up, and I ask if he's in the car. She replies no. That's when my heartbeat increased. I looked at the bathroom doors where both signs, there's 2 bathrooms, 1 men and 1 women. When vacant, the little sign will be green. When occupied and locked, the sign will be red. They were both green. When the bathroom lights are on, you can see a glow from underneath the door. The lack of the glow made me assume that there was no one in either, because the lights are motion censored. I told my sister that there was no one in the bathrooms, so I began locking the doors and shutting off the lights. My sister, with her balls of steel, opened the women's bathroom, and who's sitting on the toilet? She closed the door and begins yelling at him that the store was closing. A couple minutes pass and he's still in there, so she pounds on the door a little bit more. It's 12:08 now and the creep comes out of the bathroom, grabs a cookie, buys it, and walks out. He never looked me in the eye or spoke. He got into his car right away and hurried off. I finished locking up and met my sister at Tim Hortons nearby. Had my sister not been there, I'm unsure what could have been the outcome. I could easily not be typing this right now. Thankfully, that day at the beginning of my shift, I put in 2 weeks' notice. I had to work the next night, which was uneventful, yet I was still scared to even go outside. After telling my parents, and my mom, being the Criminal Minds fan, thought that the man may have scanned the property for cameras and went into the bathroom to wait for me to check them during the closing process of the store. He may have parked parallel for a quick getaway. So glad I'm done working there. Creep waiting in the women's bathroom. Let's not meet. The dog in the road. This particular event happened almost a year ago, sometime in mid-October. A couple friends and I drove out to visit an old friend of ours from high school, George, who now lived about an hour out of the city. We spent the whole day with him, and it was really late when we finally decided to start the drive back home. My friend Lisa was passed out in the passenger seat. She had a few drinks and decided to spend the ride home asleep. My other friend Sam was sitting in the back seat behind Lisa and was playing a game on her smartphone. I, of course, was driving. I was following the GPS's instructions back to the freeway. At that moment, we were driving down a dark street with thick trees bordering both sides. Everything was pretty peaceful, and the only sounds I could hear being that of the car moving along the road and the radio on low volume. Suddenly, my car let out a loud jolt, and it felt as if I had hit something. Sam let out a shocked scream while Lisa remained dead asleep. I slammed on the brakes, and the car came to a halt. I was breathing heavily when I asked what the hell had just happened. Sam peered through the back window and gasped. She turned to me with an angry look on her face and shouted that I had just hit a dog. I looked through the back window, and sure enough, a dog was lying on the road a few yards behind the car. Sam is a pretty big animal lover, so I wasn't surprised to see her get pissed at me. She was about to open the door and rush to the animal's aid when I stopped her. Once I had gotten over the shock of running over the dog, I got a gut feeling that told me something was off. I'm no braggart, but I consider myself to be a very attentive and safe driver. My eyes were on the road at all times, and I distinctly remembered not seeing any dog on the road prior to the car jolting. Yes, it was dark, but I was sure that I would have at least seen the dog in the headlights before hitting it. I looked through the back window and took a closer look at the dog, or at least as much as I could make out in the reddish light coming from my taillights. It was a fairly big dog, at least a golden retriever or something like that. One particular detail caught my attention. I could see the dog's tail wagging. Now, I'm no expert on the mannerisms of animals, but I was sure the last thing a dog would do after being hit by a car was to wag its tail. After a moment of thought, I pressed my foot down on the accelerator and sped off. Sam snapped at me and ordered me to go back, but I told her something was wrong with the whole situation. She continued to argue, but she fell silent as she turned back towards the back window. She asked,
"What the heck?"
with a shaken voice. I looked in the rearview mirror. Though it was dark, I was able to make out the silhouettes of 3 large figures emerging from the trees on the side of the road. The dog was now up on its feet and jumping around joyfully. The 3 figures looked in our direction as I pressed my foot down on the gas harder and sped off. Sam and I remained silent for the rest of the ride home. It wasn't until a few days later that we told Lisa about it. We've been back to visit George a few times since then, but we always make sure we leave before sunset. I dread thinking about what would have happened if we would have gotten out of the car. My senior prom. This goes back to 2002. I was a senior in high school, and prom was right around the corner. I was single at the time, but kind of on again, off again with a gal. She asked if I'd like to take her to the prom, and I said, yeah, sure, why not? The week before, of course, she cancelled. She wasn't going and didn't want to have to mess with it all. Whatever. Most of my friends, except 2, were going. One wasn't from the same school district, in fact. Come the day of, so of course, I was kind of bumped out then, even if not initially. So I meet up with these 2 guys, Dave and Jake, that evening. Jake had somehow managed to get a 12-pack of Busch and a bottle of vodka, despite being 18. The plan was to take Dave's car and go cruising, and find a party to crash after the prom and get tore up. I didn't really drink heavily, and still don't, but was feeling pretty shitty, and didn't even care. We stopped by Dave's sister's house to get a CD, a Misfits CD. Jake and I waited in the car while Dave was rummaging through the house. While in the car shooting the shit, Jake gets a call on his phone from our buddy Mark from school. Apparently some guy or guys had been trying to put the moves on the gal he was taking to the prom, and he stepped in to say something about it outside and took a punch to the eye. Now, Mark is a nice guy. He's pretty passive, but looks like trouble. He wore a short mohawk and looked almost just like Heroin Bob from SLC Punk. This isn't the type of thing that usually goes on in his life. It was, however, in mine. I got into a lot of pretty stupid fights in high school. Apparently the guys, 3 of them, told him that if he wanted to talk about it further to meet them behind the school. So he's calling us. He doesn't want to look like a pussy in front of the girl and needs a hand. We've got nothing better to do, so we make the decision for Dave before he has a chance to agree or object. Dave didn't seem to mind one way or the other. We all kinda honestly thought if we showed up outnumbering them, they'd just back down anyway. So we get there and meet up with Mark, who's pacing around outside smoking a cigarette. Rather than waste time, we just agree to get this over with and go around behind the school. Unsurprisingly, given the event, it's crowded as hell, even behind the school. People are standing around smoking, making out, puking, etc. Off to the left across the parking lot is a fairly narrow alley leading behind an office building and a church. Mark suggests they're probably there if they're still here at all. We agree and casually stroll into the alley. Mark's leading the way, all decked out for prom in a goddamn tuxedo even. Now, to frame this part here more accurately, this alley is narrow enough that all 4 of us can't stand shoulder to shoulder in it. Only 3 of us can fit at once, so we had Dave behind us. Mark wastes no time and yells, "Hey assholes, I'm back!" as we're entering the alley. He didn't need to, though. There was no way in hell they wouldn't have noticed us coming. It doesn't take long. There's no squaring up, no shit being flung. It just starts, a scuffle. It's dark in the alley with the only light from the parking lot behind us spilling in. It's a tight fit with even 3 people in here. And there are a total of 7 of us all together, swinging at each other, cussing all the way, and a bottle breaks somewhere along the way that at the time I remember thinking one of them threw it at us. In short, it's utter chaos in the alley. It's hard to even discern friend from foe. It didn't last long, though. Not only were the guys outnumbered, but apparently drunk to boot, which was probably why this all started to begin with. 2 of them ended up pushing past us after a pretty good beating and bolted across the parking lot. One even tripped and fell straight on his face onto the concrete, but scrambled back up and kept going. That got Jake to start laughing his ass off. I was trying to tend to some swollen, probably broken knuckles, and Mark is cussing up a storm because he ripped the sleeve of his rented tux somewhere in that madness. One of the guys got knocked out cold, and I mean he's out, snoring deeply. If you've ever seen someone get knocked out, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's not normal snoring, but like loud, deep snoring. He's just laid out cold on his back, in a fucking suit, laying amongst trash and dirt. I ask if we should drag him out into the parking lot somewhere so someone can find him or something, but Dave just says, "Nah, fuck him." So we start piling out of the alley with Mark saying, "Hold on, give him a minute, he'll catch up." We hear a zipper, and we turn around to see him with his back to us, and he's literally pissing on this guy. At which point, Jake almost doubled over laughing, so hard that he's wheezing. Mark gets done, zips up, and comes back outside still cussing about his sleeve, thanks us, and tells us to meet him at his place afterwards. He was the only one of us at the time that lived in his own studio apartment. So we split off with Jake barely able to control himself the whole time, randomly bursting back into fits of laughter. It honestly was pretty funny. Mark pissing on the guy, snoring so loud he could have set off a car alarm. The only one not laughing is Dave, who took a pretty good blast to the head and is complaining of a headache. We take off in his car though and intend to just go back to his place and hang out until after prom. Along the way he stops at McDonald's and buys a few burgers, asking if we want any. The night drags by from there, and we do end up going to Mark's place after the prom, but don't stay too long as he kind of politely shoos us out so he can spend some time alone with his date. We're going to call it a night, but Dave says we haven't even touched the booze in his trunk. But there's no way we can even take it out, let alone drink it near this place, because his dad will beat him. Jake's mom doesn't even know he's gone, and hates Dave anyway from a previous incident involving booze. My house isn't going to work either. So Dave decides we'll just drive to this abandoned movie theater a few blocks away and stand around outside. We agree, and that's exactly what we do. The idea that the police could find us here drinking becomes clear, and Dave decides to park on the block behind the movie theater, with us walking through a small little clearing of woods leading up behind the building. We'd been standing near the side of the front of the building, cracking jokes and still laughing about Mark pissing on the guy in the alley. I wasn't drinking much. I don't really like beer, so I just had a few pulls from the vodka bottle. Jake was getting wobbly-legged though, and Dave had already stopped, feeling a bit lightheaded. Suddenly, bright headlights pour onto the parking lot and a car comes slowly rolling in. It's about 20 feet away and turned with the passenger door to us. Dave says he thinks that it's the police and to be ready to bolt back to the woods, something that's probably not going to be real easy for Jake. It's not the police though. It's a sedan of some sort, and a guy leans out the window and yells, "What the fuck are you little faggots doing here on my lot?" Jake, ever the badass of course, yells back telling him to fuck off. The guy starts to slide back into the car, then opens the door to let himself out, and the driver turns off the engine. The guy getting out yells back, "What the fuck did you just say to me?" Jake kinda wobbles for a second, then pushes past me and yells at the top of his lungs, "I said go fuck yourself!" and launches a half-full bottle of vodka at the car. It falls short and smashes several feet in front of the guy. Then all the doors open, and the driver and 3 more guys from the back seat come pouring out. One of them has a baseball bat. Without even hesitating, I just grab Jake's collar and slap Dave on the shoulder and say, "Hey, it's time to go, now." And we take off toward the woods. I hear them running behind us as we come crashing through the bushes leading to the woods. Jake is stumbling all over the place to the point where I'm having to hold on to his shirt sleeve to ensure that he doesn't take a dive. We get to the car, which is luckily unlocked, and dive inside, as we kind of half-assed toss Jake into the back seat, who's laughing like an asshole as he tumbles in. Dave's starting up the car as we all turn and realize they didn't follow us all the way. At least, if they did, we can't see them. The woods aren't thick enough to really hide too well, but it's pretty dark. At this point, it's probably after midnight. There are only 2 ways out of the block we're parked in. One goes all the way around the entire neighborhood, and the other is behind us and goes back around the front of the movie theater. We decided to just go back that way as fast as we can. We probably should have went the long way around, but none of us were completely thinking straight, or even really sober at that point. As we come around the bend leading to the front of the movie theater, the sedan is coming out of the lot, not even 3 feet from Dave's car as he passes by. I'm sitting in the passenger seat and make eye contact with the passenger from the sedan. He's got a shaved head and is shirtless, and he just flashes me this evil grin as he points to us and says something to the driver. They pull out right behind us and are right on Dave's ass. The passenger is leaning out of his window yelling something that I can't hear over the Misfits CD in the car, and then throws something that clunks off the roof of the car and goes skittering over the hood. A tall boy beer can. We're coming up on a 3-lane highway that's dead empty, and these guys start speeding up and trying to pull up alongside of the car and swerve into us. Dave panics and hits the brakes, which causes them to slightly clip the front bumper and bolt ahead of us. He then starts forward again and tries to slip behind them into the other lane. They cut him off and start to pull up against us again, this time on the driver's side. The passenger is hanging out the window, this time almost sitting on the door, and rears back and swings something toward the car. It's the baseball bat. He misses and the car swerves for a moment. Dave is wide-eyed and muttering, "Oh shit, oh fuck, shit." Even Jake has quit laughing at this point. The car swerves back and Dave is trying to move to the far end of the lane. The passenger swings again and connects sort of with the driver door. It clips the mirror and knocks it back. Dave rolls down his window and in desperation throws the only things we had at hand back at this guy. First, the CD case, which misses the passenger and shatters against the top rim of the car door. And then a handful of as much loose change as he could grab from the console. Quarters, nickels, dimes, pennies go flying. Some of it hits the passenger in the face and the arm, and some sails into the car, some missing entirely. That seems to have had some sort of effect as the passenger pulls back into the car and Dave floors it. Another minute or 2 go by like this, and we're coming to an intersection with another car at the light. Dave begins to slow down and turns on his signal to turn into the parking lot of a Quick Trip gas station. As soon as the car stops, just get out calmly and go quickly inside. This is a police substation, it's safe. Just take a leak, buy a soda or something, don't act like anything is up, Dave says as he pulls in front of the store. We get out and dart inside. Jake goes into the bathroom and is in there for a while. Dave and I buy a soda and some bottled water. The clerk asks us if we went to prom, how was it, etc. We keep small talking with him, hoping Jake didn't pass out on the toilet. He finally comes stumbling out of the bathroom, grinning. The clerk observes, "Looks like he had fun." Dave nervously forces a chuckle and says, "He's not feeling so well. It's kind of hot outside." Which it was. Our friends have pulled into the back of the parking lot behind the gas pumps and are sitting there idling. Dave notices and nods to them for me to notice. I decide to try to stall some time and ask for directions to a Taco Bell that I know full well is on the other side of town, saying we're trying to meet some friends there. The clerk is thinking on that for a moment and starts to give pretty detailed directions there as we notice the sedan apparently give up after having sat there for a few moments. We wait for the guy to finish, thank him, and then pick up a pack of Wintermint gum that we forgot, just to make sure and pass another minute of time or so. After getting back into the car, Dave says he's going to drop me off and then sneak Jake in through his back door so he can sleep it off until the morning. And that's that. We luckily didn't run into the crazy guys in the sedan again, and that ended a night that even 13 years later I'll never forget. And that was how my high school senior prom went. To the drunks in the sedan, we never did meet again, and I hope we never do. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the stories and you would like to hear more, please click the info tab in the top right corner of your screen. And remember,
it's always darker when you open your eyes.